Good evening. We start week 5 here. I think it's the easiest week to understand because it's probably the week that has the most you might have picked up from the news just in your lives. I also think it's the most applicable to your careers and to just your personal, just day to day living of what's going on in the economy and what should I pay the most attention to. So we're back to a 3 chapter week here. Chapter 15 now, we're going to start to look at money. And really, our focus here is on the difference between how money is measured. So you're going to look at M1 and M2, understand the differences between them. Really, M1 is probably a little bit more important to what we're talking about in this course. We're going to talk about the difference between a financial and a non-financial intermediary. And then we're going to take a little bit of time to look at multipliers, and really that has to do with the reserve requirements, which is one of the things that the Fed can do to help control the supply of money. This looks really scary. Deposits and reserve requirements are actually really simple idea to understand. Chapter 16 here, now we're going to look at the Fed and specifically monetary policy. The things that the Federal Reserve can do to control the supply of money. And really, ultimately, that then leads to what the Fed can do to try and either pump the economy or pump the brakes on the economy. And so we'll get into the 3 tools that they really have, which leads into one of the discussion questions for this week. And then this next chapter, the last chapter for this week, is fiscal policy and what the government can do to try and help the economy along. Those of you who are old enough to have paid attention through the Great Recession, you're going to see a lot of things here when we talk about fiscal policy that our government did to help bring us out of the Great Recession. So the 2 discussion questions for this week, imagine that you are the chair of the Fed, and as you look at where we currently sit in terms of employment or unemployment, really is what we're talking about here, which was talked about last week a little bit. Unemployment is at near historic lows in our country. Inflation, interest rates, how we're trading. The key thing here is there are 3 tools in the Fed toolbox, which you're going to learn about this week. Focus your answer on those 3 tools. Don't wander into the government should spend more, the government should do this. We are talking about what the Fed controls, and the Fed is independent of the federal government. So suggesting things that the government should do is not on topic here. So make sure you stay on task there. We're then going to take a little bit of a look at debt. We're at $22 trillion or so in debt. One of my favorite websites to look at this is the US Debt Clock. You can get lost on this webpage looking at all the different measurements of our debt. The thing I like about it is if you hover your mouse over them, it shows you the source. So when we see 22.3 trillion in national debt, that's coming from the US Treasury, which we should probably trust our government for providing reliable information. And all kinds of numbers here that you can get lost in. And so this one we're going to focus on some of the reasons why that debt has increased so dramatically in the last generation, and it really has. And 3 things that the Fed or that the federal government should do to curb this? And this is going to be a whole variety of answers, I think, from you. Ultimately, it's going to boil down to some combinations of spend less, tax more, or both. I'm curious to see how the 13 or 14 of you approach this issue. The video review here is really focusing in on where our economy is today. You're going to read a little bit about the leading economic indicators, a whole bunch of statistics that try and predict what's coming soon in the economy. If you search a little bit here too for the Fed's current thoughts, they're kind of the leaks of where this is going with the Fed have changed in the last probably month to 6 weeks. So the indicators are pointing them in a different direction than they had planned. And so that is what you are going to share in your video. And kind of what you think is going to happen in the next year. So if you knew what was going to happen, you could all get very rich. Because if you know what's going to happen, you can plan accordingly. The whole point of this is these are our best guesses. And that's why, a good economist is like a baseball player. If they're right half the time, they're incredible. And then your paper section for this week is really looking at fiscal and monetary policies in those countries. This might be a little tricky for some of you with the countries you've chosen. So if you're a little light on information, do your best, but I understand just because of the nature of it. As far as finishing up the current week, I'm going to be on the road all day Monday, heading back from DC to home. So it'll probably be Tuesday that I will give you feedback on both the videos and the papers for this past week. And then we'll roll into this week and go from there. Have a great week.